So one thing we didn't talk about is when you turned vegan, because obviously the food was medicine was something that was planted really early, but then you didn't really go vegan until like between that Christmas party and the New Year's party with the vegan cookies.
So let's see. I did so I went pescatarian, and then I was a pescatarian until I was vegan, and I became vegan overnight one night. So it's kind of an interesting story, but it all started off for me probably about 12 years ago now. I was watching the news. I used to do that. I don't do that anymore.
No, I know.
I was watching. Thankful I did back then. But
I used to think I was supposed to watch.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what responsible adults do. They watch the news. They read the paper. They know what's going on in the world. You know,
this makes me feel horrible. Why do I have to do this?
Yes, but I was doing that. I was watching the news, and I saw this. I was at a very probably the most unconscious time of my life was back then, but I was starting to study, this idea of laws of attraction and metaphysics. I had just, been given little bits and pieces, and I was interested in, and I was learning about vibrations and energy and how energy doesn't die, it transfers. And I was learning about all these ideas. And around that same time, I was watching the news one night, and I saw there was this giant mad cow disease, like meat recall. And so on the news, they were filming at a farm, and these cows that had the mad cow disease, and they were forklifting them, and they were alive, and they were covered in their own feces, and they were being treated like objects, and they were crying in pain, and they were they're forklifting them around with these tractors that you pick dirt up with and stuff. And I don't even know if forklift's the right name for it, but you know what I mean, And
I've seen that done, unfortunately.
And I was horrified. To me, there was a very powerful disassociation of, the meat on my plate and the animal that it came from. I never really made that connection prior to that. And then I sat there watching this news segment, and I felt like I locked eyes with the cow on the screen.
Oh my God, that's the biggest thing when you look and when you lock eyes and you see that they're a being.
I saw this being that was in pain and crying and probably scared for its life. And I was like, I'm contributing to that, the choices that I'm making, they're contributing to that. And that animal that's feeling all that fear and pain, and how is that showing up in my life? Because I'm eating that, and just had this big, aha moment. So that day I was like, I'm never eating red meat again. And, I thought I'm done with that. That's all I needed to do. And then a week later, my little brother was in town visiting from Arizona, and I was telling him, I don't eat meat. I don't eat red meat now, And he was like, oh, really? Why not? And I told him what happened. And he's like, well, why just red meat? And I was like, well, because what they're doing to the cows. He's like, have you ever seen that video, Meat Your Meat? I was like, no, what's that? He's like, let's pull that up on YouTube.
Phase 2.
Ouch. Yeah. And so he pulled it up on YouTube, and he showed me, and that was the last day that I had ever eaten, chicken or anything else I saw in that video. Pig, chicken, all of those, animal. I just, again, the power of association. In that moment, I realized that those foods were also doing those same things, and that I didn't want to eat those animals, and I didn't want to, rob them of their lives. So at that time, it was very much an ethical thing. And at that time, I didn't really see a problem with fish or eggs or dairy. I hadn't made that connection, and I wasn't exposed to that information. So I went, that route for, I think it was 4 or 5 years. And then I was starting to study first the holistic nutrition. And I mentioned earlier how I was like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be plant-based, at that time when I saw the list of the different items, that we needed to consume and where you could get them from. And the animal list had all these negative impacts. And so that was at that time that I think it was right when Forks Over Knives was coming out and blew up, the China study Forks Over Knives. And I call it the perfect combination, or the perfect storm. But I watched Forks Over Knives one night, and I had a pen and paper, and I was just taking notes, and I could not believe the information that I was hearing about. I thought I had to drink milk for my strong bones, and where would I get my protein if I didn't have fish? And, I just thought, and here I was oh my gosh, this is crazy. I've been lied to my whole life. And so I watched it that night, and I was paralyzed. I was the thought of committing to veganism was like so extreme to me that I was like, I couldn't say that out loud even, but I was like, I cannot eat that until I find out more, you know? And that next night I watched Earthlings and then it was all over with.
That's a done deal.
Well, I only got through 45 minutes of it. I've never gone back and watched the whole thing.
I did
but
like 15 minutes.
I was sobbing and it was awful. But the part that was good for me about that was making the connection to like the oceans and the fish. And like, because for me, I had stopped eating animals, but I didn't really view fish as animals at that time. I didn't really realize that they were also, you know, little beings that had
Why do you think that is?
and-
That's such a... we hear that a lot. Like,
Yeah.
they just don't...
Well, I
the
think
association
that
with fish.
We're just like the other beings that end up on our plate. We're completely disconnected from them, and because they're just these like, they don't require us to, you know, feed them, and like they kind of are like self-sufficient. Yeah. So I think they're so far off of what people think they're meaningful. But like, there's a great book called Fishes Feel.
Oh,
and
I've never heard of that.
It's all about the intelligence of fish. And you know, I grew up. My dad was a fisherman, and I grew up with him catching the fish and then beating the absolute shit out of it and killing it on the back of the boat. And I remember even as a kid, like just cowering and feeling so sad and hurt. And then it would be on the grill, and then they'd want me to eat it, and I was like, I don't want to eat that. Like, I never really liked fish. I don't know how much of the connection it was like, I can't eat that because I saw my dad kill it.
Right.
But it was because I would fish too. It didn't really make, but I never really liked it. But I just remember those moments of being like, oh my God, he just killed that. And it was like awful. Because he would just slam it with like a mallet. It was like horrendous.
I
And
feel
the whole
like
family would be
I feel
there.
like they do a good job in that documentary of exposing that. Like, to me, like when I saw that documentary, like I made the connection to fish. Like, wow. Like,
and they want to live. They don't want to die.
Yeah.
And they're super intelligent.
If you can't make that connection to fish, it's like, think about all the bykill. Think about the toxicity in the oceans. Think about, there's so many reasons.
The
like
sea turtles,
that if
the
you don't make the
dolphins.
connection to the fish, I'm sure you can make, you know, connection to other marine life. And if you can't do that even, then it's like, make the connection to your health, because my goodness, like it's the furthest thing from health food on the planet.
And cholesterol, fat.
Yes.
Mercury.
So
toxicity is like
so
huge.
unhealthy.
I mean, if you're eating fish today, you're eating plastic today. That's the reality of it. We have a plastic ocean now. So there's so many different reasons.
I think to answer your question, BJ, too, is like, I just don't think they know. I don't think they know that fish is extremely unhealthy for you.
Yeah, so they don't.
They're under the water too, so it's not something you visually see a lot. I was just thinking about
but
that,
it's
like the
just
cow fields.
Yes.
But just like the livestock is, you know, decimating the land, the fishing industry is decimating the ocean.
Well, I always tell people, like, do you like to breathe? And they say yes. I'm like, well, 1 out of every 2 breaths you take comes from the phytoplankton in the ocean. If the fish die, the phytoplankton dies, and we die. So if nothing else, if you like to breathe, you should probably eliminate fish from your diet.
And one thing that I think I've said it on another podcast, so I'll say it. But our friend Eric wrote a book called The Skeptical Vegan, and he talks about how when fish, like how we kill fish, right? So we go out and we get them in these huge nets and all that, and that's terrible because they're all fighting or whatever. Yeah. But basically, we just leave them. I think like what my dad was doing might even have been like better than how fish are dying, because we throw them in a bucket and they suffocate because their air is water.
Yeah.
So it's equivalent to us being to us drowning.
Wow.
We take them out of their air supply and they suffocate.
And suffer.
And we just throw them on top of each other in a bucket, whether we're fishing on the beach or whether it's a huge, net that's trolling from these fishing boats. And that like really broke my heart even more. I mean, I haven't eaten fish. I don't even know the last time I ate fish.
A lot of people will take that and, you know, they'll say, well, you know, I only eat fish that I catch. Or, you know, I get that a lot. People are like, well, you know, I only buy fish that's been caught, you know, humanely, if that's even a term. And you know, I still, no matter how you do it, I obviously don't agree with the trolling in the bottom of the ocean and killing everything in its path. I don't agree with the suffocation. I don't agree with any of that. But you know, I think that a lot of people do. They'll if they think, just like with, you know, oh well, it's farm raised, it's, you know, it's free range, whatever, you know, like people think like, well, if it's done more humanely, but the reality is there are how many billion people on this planet today, you know, and if we're going to feed all of these people, you can't have, you know, free range for everybody. You can't have wild caught salmon for everybody because there's not enough in the ocean. So the only way to do it is to do it with these unsustainable practices or these terribly inhumane practices. And so I feel like that it's got to be the evolution in the way that we eat.
I think, like, ask yourself, like, I mean, I don't believe that we have a right to take a life, including our own. Like, I don't think that we have a right to take a life, whether it's a bee or I can't tell you how many freaking bees we
or
say.
Snails
same,
today.
I know.
Snails.
Oh my God.
On the trail today, like, I'm trying to run fast, and it was like,
Saving snails.
Yes.
In all seriousness, like, I don't think that we
Do
have
no
the
harm.
right to take a life, and I believe that we pay for that.
Yeah.
We'll pay for that. You know, we don't need to worry about the people who are killing all these animals because unfortunately they're going to pay for it, and I think they already are.
I just think that when you know better, you should do better. And that's a conversation I have with my kids a lot, especially my teenagers, is, when you know better, you have a responsibility to do better. If you don't know, I mean, I grew up eating a certain way. I didn't know better. I wasn't exposed to that information, but once I knew better, I wanted to do better. There's a saying, it goes something like, oftentimes people stumble upon truth. They pick themselves up, they dust themselves off, and they carry on as if nothing ever happened. And that's just never been me, I stumble upon truth and I want to do something with that truth. And my hope and my goal is that, in the work that you guys are doing and the work that I'm doing, we're all doing our part in helping people to, pick themselves up, dust themselves off, and make a different path, a better choice.
Beautiful. Perfect. I love it.